We spoke this morning about raising the profile of tech in the UK, and particularly in the north. And I think Thinking Digital as a production over the last 7 or 8 years has played a role in that, and I think it will continue to play and has the potential to play a huge role both in raising the profile and through the networks, especially as it moves into London. I've been a member of the community since it started 7 or 8 years ago, and so I just wanted to pay a tribute to Herb and his crew for what they've done and what they've created. And I think let's put our hands together and thank them. Herb always comes up at the end and thanks all his production team and all the speakers, but no one ever thanks Herb, so thank you, Herb. So my name's Stephen Waddington. We heard this morning from Eddie, who talked about interruption and how we look at our smartphones every 3 minutes. We heard just before lunch from LJ talking about multi-sensory experiences, shared experiences. So I want to talk about sex. I thought it would be a good starter after lunch. Actually, that's going to come shortly. What I want to talk about is how organisations, how organisations communicate on the internet and the opportunity they've had for the last 20 years to communicate in a completely democratic and transparent way. There's now 3.2 billion people connected to the internet. I checked that on Siri. I don't know if the query went to Wolfram, but 3.2 billion people on the internet. Latest ITU figures. And those people have access to this beautiful network of people around the world, and we have media unlike ever before and networks to connect and communicate with each other, and it's utterly democratic. I can communicate with anyone anywhere around the world, and organisations have that same opportunity. The trouble is they're not doing it very cleverly or very well, and they're using all these new channels to do what they did previously and communicate in a top-down command and control fashion that has more in common actually with the Roman Empire and the dawn of civilization than it does for communication that's fit for purpose for the modern internet. So you can build, as an organisation, you can build beautiful websites, you can build beautiful apps, you can create Twitter pages, you can create Facebook pages, but if your product or service doesn't meet my expectation, I'm going to use those services, and we use those services every single day to moan and bitch about what you aren't doing to meet our expectation. And in Manchester, open your phone first thing in the morning and look at Twitter and the experiences that people are having on the so-called Transpennine Express. And you'll see exactly what's happening. I love this slide. This was a photo I took, a very traditional old form of media of an organisation, a council, trying to communicate in a very modern way. How does this planning notice affect you? Actually, they're not really that interested in how you communicate back to them, because you have to take down this long string of numbers and write to a postal address. So someone's daubed on it. It affects me so badly, I want to cry. We act like we're surprised and shocked about this. So organisations are surprised and shocked about the internet and what's happening and the way that publics and citizens, consumers are answering back in these ways. They're turning these channels back on organisations. There's a book in the middle of that stack that I pulled off my shelf when I was putting this deck together a couple of weeks ago, called the Clue Train Manifesto. Clue Train was written in 1998. And it's a series of theses that predicted, a bunch of clever writers wrote it, a bunch of theses that predict exactly what's happened with the internet. They say the internet is the world's biggest market, and markets are conversations. Organisations aren't ready for those two things. And that book has informed a whole series of thinking around communication on the internet and networks, and I'd urge anyone to go and read it. I kind of use it as a litmus test when I'm interviewing candidates coming into the organisation. If they've read Clue Train Manifesto, I know they've got a certain sort of mindset and that they're thinking in a way that I am. So we're in this time and place where there's this paradox. There's organisations, brands, with a particular set of motivations and purposes, trying to communicate using this beautiful network we call the internet with us, human beings. And they have a particular set of needs and agendas, and typically they're not necessarily aligned with what we want as citizens and consumers. So this diagram, I call it a brand social paradox, is completely unaligned, and often those two circles might be poles apart. And the issue is that organisations are taking the traditional forms of communication and marketing and applying those wholesale to the internet. They're not using the internet to listen, as we heard from Julian this morning. And I'm going to show you some examples of where this can go badly wrong. I'm also going to end the talk at the end with some exceptional examples of organisations that do it incredibly well. So here's the sex bit. When an organisation decides, a book publisher decides to promote the latest copy of 50 Shades of Grey, the modern way to do that, of course, is to go out to a network like Twitter and have a conversation, in modern marketing parlance, with everybody on the internet about this new publication. When that publication, though, is 50 Shades of Grey, guess what? People are going to ask the author about their motivation and inspiration for particular scenes. So you get questions like this, are absolutely inevitable. And honestly, I look back through this Twitter stream, and I'd urge you to do it. Look back through this Twitter stream, and that was the best I could find, the most suitable tweet I could find for an after-lunch audience. So, yeah. And you get things like this happen when all parts of an organisation aren't joined up. I gave the reveal too quickly, didn't I? Sorry. When parts of an organisation aren't necessarily joined up and operate in silos. So typically, social as the new thing, social media, has been siphoned, has been pushed off to an aspect of communications or marketing within an organisation. We have a bunch of typically young people over there who do the social stuff, and they're thrown content and campaigns typically at the last minute. It's not integrated. So when an organisation like Tesco faces a scandal like the Horsemeat Scandal, and this broke 18 months, 2 years ago, we all remember this, when the social team at the end of the day that this scandal breaks tweets in a very colloquial and nice chatty way, we're off to hit the hay. It's probably not the wisest thing to do, is it? To be fair to Tesco, they recognised their area quickly, because guess what? People told them, and they apologised and chewed a lot of humble pie. Then you get daft stuff like this. We saw the corporate video, the branded video, just at the start of this session. But that's very typical in the way that a lot of organisations try and communicate in a very bland way. If you transfer that out onto the social web, and you see this every Friday afternoon, you see it around major events like Halloween, Bonfire Night coming up, where brands try and be part of these conversations because it's cool and edgy, and they put out content like this that's just kind of meaningless and doesn't really resonate. I used to play a game when Twitter started rolling out advertising, and brands would use these promoted tweets to try and engage with publics, audiences, citizens, consumers on Twitter. And I'd go back every time I saw one and ask a question. I didn't get one response ever in the whole time I played this for 6 months or so. Watch out for this on a Friday as well. You typically get brands posting pictures of people jumping up in the air, typically on a beach with a sunset, saying, "It's Friday, how do you feel?" When you see something like that, respond and tell them, and you'll never get a response, I guarantee it. And there's a neediness as well. There's a technique that marketeers use on the internet which is really smart. As part of social listening, you listen to a conversation, you try and be part of the zeitgeist and come back and respond with content. And that can work really, really well if it's done authentically and you have something relevant to contribute to the conversation. It's got to be rooted in listening. It's got to be rooted in a purpose. But when you see a pizza company suggesting to the royal family they should call their baby pizza. That's just it's just nonsense, isn't it? And you know, LinkedIn actually as a platform has seen a resurgence this year. It's brilliant as a B2B platform. If you're in the B2B space, it's really, really good. But like so many platforms that provide a blogging function, Medium's another, Tumblr is another, WordPress. Now, people have spotted the opportunity and think just because they can publish content, they should. Now, I blurred this design out, this article out. Actually, this was a really good article about the impact of Uber in India. So to do the author no discredit, but you know, I opened Pulse this morning to look at content on LinkedIn so I could throw in a few colloquialisms, and the first story that hit me, and I am not taking the piss, first story that hit me was the top 10 tech innovations for 2016. Top of the list, number one was mobile. This is going to be the year of 2016 will be the year of mobile. Seriously, it's irrelevant. Just because you can publish content on the internet doesn't mean you should. It must be relevant and it must be interesting. Otherwise, it's spam. We talked about automation. Conran talked about automation this morning, and automation has a role for sure in communication on the internet. But don't ever try and automate a conversation. You wouldn't ever do it in real life. Don't try and do it on the internet. But scheduling software is so often used by organisations as an attempt to try and build scale within a communication team. And when stuff like this happens, and God rest her soul, Joan Rivers, who's no longer with us, posted a photo to Instagram that was syndicated then on her Facebook page 6 days after her death around the iPhone 6 launch. It looked a bit bad, and people were understandably upset. So automation has a role. Automation is incredibly important to help listen and understand conversations on the web and make sense of the huge amounts of data. But don't ever try and automate a conversation. It doesn't work. We're filling the internet with shit as we apply, as other organisations apply traditional types of communication to this thing called the internet and try and do it at scale. It just results in spam and nonsense. True conversation should be rooted in listening. We've heard that from at least 3 of the speakers this morning, and engagement should be rooted in context. Now, I had a bit of a awakening around this 2.5 years ago. My wife was ill with cancer, and we were really careful around this time about the way we communicated on the web. We've got 3 children, and so we're very cautious about this. And cancer is one of those topics on the internet, especially on Facebook. It's like miscarriages, it's like mental illness, it's like alcoholism. It's kind of shunted off to an area of the web that we just don't, we kind of hide. But actually, when you do share honestly and openly, as we did, I did a shot of photo of her in February, when she'd just been refused her last treatment of chemotherapy because she was so ill. People responded in a really beautiful human way. And so that kind of was a huge lesson to me, that if you bring a level of transparency and authenticity to the internet and openness, it will respond with love and a huge degree of affection. Now, I'm not suggesting organisations can go and do this and should do this, but they need to stop moving towards this kind of level of engagement. And Katie's incredibly well now and 12 months in remission. So this story ends really well. Maslow cracked this, a psychologist in the 1940s and 50s. He defined this very simple model called the hierarchy of human need. A very simple pyramid that sets out, and you often see this riffs on this with Wi-Fi added as a layer at the bottom. But he set out very simply this hierarchy of human need. And typically, organisations and brands that communicate on the web and want to have a conversation with us as citizens and human beings, first thing they need to do is listen. Most don't. The second thing they do is to root their conversation in context and purpose that's aligned as high up this pyramid as possible. That's from the 1940s and the 50s, so no surprises. I want to end with some personal examples of organisations. I'm going to take that back. Personal examples of organisations that do this really, really well, I think. And there are some organisations that are being rebuilt around the internet and building their communication purposely for it and engaging with very active communities and benefiting from that. And I think Amazon is one of them. Amazon has received a good deal of criticism recently since a New York Times expose in May that criticised the performance management of its staff. Actually, my take on that is it's effectively run organisation. And from a customer point of view, if you are an Amazon customer, and I live in the deepest Northumberland, actually services like next day delivery for Prime that are free are fantastic. The services via the Kindle are fantastic. We can get access to any information, any book we want immediately. Services like the video on demand streaming services are absolutely fantastic. And the way it communicates and embraces the social web is also fantastic. So this is an absolute true tweet. 10 days ago when I ordered a plastic box to be delivered at home, storage box, and they sent me a chainsaw. And I tweeted, Amazon help, I ordered a plastic box, you've sent me a chainsaw, what am I going to do? I immediately came back and responded and acknowledged the error and told me how to fix it. Fantastic. But I've been a big fan of Lego for the last 40 years or so. I still play with, I've got a young son who's 9 who's enjoying the same experiences that I had with Lego in using it as a tool for creative exploration and to make stuff. So he's accessing, sort of becoming a maker. And we've discovered these communities that Lego has around the organisation, and Lego Ideas is a beautiful one where you can go and submit your ideas for Lego sets, and other people within the community can vote and share those and comment on those. And so you have this very beautiful group of makers who are all working towards this common goal, and Lego about once a month picks one of these designs that's the most popular and puts it into production. Now it also does that right the way around the organisation. If you've ever opened a new Lego set, started to build it and found you've missed a piece, go and try and report to Lego that you've missed a piece, and I guarantee you will be sent that piece by courier the next day. It's an incredible customer service. And frankly, if you've just bought the latest VW Lego set and you want to build it and you're missing a piece, you want it, and you want to get it immediately. They realise the importance of this. And the final one is Patagonia, which is a company. I live up in Northumberland, do a lot of walking and hiking and climbing, and use a lot of their gear. And it's a company that's used the web in an utterly transformational way to communicate around what the organisation is doing to make itself sustainable. So Patagonia makes these incredible clothes that use oil products and such like. But if you go onto its website and you check out how the supply chain for each product, it will show you how it's moving that supply chain to make it completely sustainable. So it's a fantastic organisation, and here's an example of one of the communities it has, where it absolutely celebrates and encourages people within its customers to resell its product. It encourages them to get them fixed and repaired, and helps you do that. It's an utterly fantastic company that's using the web, I think, in a very, very good way. So 3 examples of companies that I think are reinventing themselves, reinventing their communication fit for purpose for the web in a way that completely engages me and is enjoyable. I want to leave you with these 3 things. I said Clue Train fantastic book, a book to return to time and time again, just because it sets out these theses and did it, 16, 17 years ago in a way that absolutely stands the test of the time. The internet is a conversation. If you remember that, you start with listening and you become part of that conversation through context, you're going to do well. Second thing is, as the companies I've shown you have done, they've reached for a higher purpose and they've engaged people through that higher purpose, customers through that higher purpose. So whatever your role in communicating on behalf of an organisation, we all have a role. Dare to reach for that higher purpose. And then the final bullet point was shared with me about 5 or 6 years ago with a senior Wikipedia editor who Wikipedia is a very special community of people building content on the web. It also, because they're so concerned with authenticity and fact-checking, it also can be a noisy and discursive community at times. And a simple bit of advice on working with the community, negotiating with and working with other editors on talk pages was if you're well behaved and you don't be a dick, you won't go wrong. Please don't be a dick. Enjoy the internet. It's a beautiful place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First off, thanks. It's great to see you again. Just a quick one, because we don't have much time, but ultimately a lot of these things, it's not rocket science, as they say, right?
None of it is.
So you work with tons of organizations from small ones to very large ones, and et cetera, et cetera. What is the thing that separates the two? I mean, what is there? Is it down to the leadership? Is it down? I mean, how is it that people don't? I mean, even totally self-serving stuff like telling a story that's just all positive. There's no emotional variety. It's just a terrible way to tell a story. Anyone to know that.
So I think there's two answers to that. The first thing is people who grew up with the internet and people who didn't grow up with the internet. So I think it's going to take a generation for this stuff to change, because we've still got to see the leaders of organisations who grew up at university without the internet kind of work through and retire. And that's not to do disservice to anyone that has self-educated, but there is certainly there's if the internet's been normative in your life, then you've got a certain attitude to it. The second thing is, I think organisations that have been smart enough to build communities around themselves, so they don't market, they have a relationship with their citizens or consumers or whatever the stakeholders might be, are the ones that have cracked it, and you see that time and time again through the examples that I've given.
Cool.
So they're not pumping shit out onto the internet.
Cool. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks.